As the morning sun illuminated San Francisco skyscrapers, Natalie Keller was already at her desk. She was in her 7th year as a senior designer at the advertising agency Creative Impulse. The light streaming through the window illuminated the photo frame, neatly arranged on her desk. It contained only her graduation photo. Natalie had meticulously tied her hair in a ponytail and was dressed in a simple yet sophisticated navy blouse and gray pantsuit. Colleagues often called her a perfectionist, sometimes keeping their distance, but everyone acknowledged the quality of her work. Taking a deep breath, she sipped her coffee and checked her emails. A message from her mother was flashing in the corner of the screen. After a moment's hesitation, Natalie decided to open it. "Natalie, I haven't received your response about your father's birthday party. It's next Sunday. Brooke has even taken special time off work." Natalie sighed as she stared at the screen. Her mother, Elaine, had worked as an English teacher at Oak Park High School in suburban San Francisco for 25 years. She was adored by her students and respected by her colleagues at home. She always portrayed the image of a perfect mother, showing particularly doting affection for her younger daughter, Brooke. "I'll reply later," Natalie muttered, leaving the email marked as read. She didn't want to go to her father's birthday party. Her father, Stephen, had worked as a sales manager at the local real estate company, Keller Really, for over 20 years. He was sociable, pleasant, and well regarded by clients. However, at home, he always deferred to her mother's opinions and rarely intervened in conflicts between the daughters. Natalie often described her relationship with her father as superficial respect. He was proud of her grades and professional successes, but never truly tried to understand her. Instead, Stephen's attention was always directed toward her sister. Brooke. Just thinking of that name stirred complex emotions in Natalie. Brooke worked in the personal banking division of the local First National Bank, and rumors of her promotion to assistant branch manager had been circulating recently. With long blonde hair and blue eyes, Brooke had been the cheerleading captain in school and still maintained an active social life, going out to parties with friends on weekends. "Mother's favorite," Natalie whispered quietly. It wasn't mere jealousy, but a conclusion drawn from years of observation at family gatherings. Her mother would be excited, talking about Brooke, while showing only formal interest in Natalie's achievements. Her phone on the desk vibrated. The screen displayed grandfather. Natalie's expression softened. It was a call from her maternal grandfather, Howard, a former judge and a wealthy man. He might be the only family member Natalie could truly open up to. "Good morning." Natalie answered the phone with a cheerful voice. "Good morning, Natalie. How are you doing?" William's warm voice resonated. "I'm fine, just busy. How are you doing?" "Still not letting the young ones beat me," Howard answered with a laugh. "About Stephen's birthday party. You're coming, aren't you?" Natalie hesitated for a moment. "I haven't decided yet. Work is keeping me busy." Her grandfather sighed deeply on the other end. "I understand, Natalie. I know how difficult family gatherings can be for you. But would you come for my sake? I'm getting old. There aren't many opportunities for the whole family to gather." Natalie closed her eyes and pressed her forehead with her hand. She couldn't refuse her grandfather's words. "All right, Grandfather, I'll come. I'm relieved to hear that also. I saw the article about your project last month. It was excellent. Your talent is genuine." Tears welled up in Natalie's eyes at his words. After hanging up, Natalie gazed out the window, deep in thought. Since childhood, she had felt like the odd one out in her family. Serious and sincere, her family often described her. As boring and inflexible, her relationships with her family, especially those outside her grandfather, seemed to grow more distant with each passing year. She had been invited to family gatherings less frequently in recent years, even for Christmas and Thanksgiving. She was increasingly told Natalie must be busy. It was partly true, but she sometimes deliberately scheduled appointments, anticipating the rejection. Natalie turned her chair back to face her computer screen. She opened her calendar and checked next Sunday. It was blank. Slowly, she typed Dad's birthday party and saved it. "I wonder what excuses I'll hear this time," she muttered as she returned to work. Deep down, she yearned for family bonds while constantly fearing rejection. All she wanted was to be truly accepted as a member of the family. On Saturday afternoon, Natalie stood on the porch of her mother's house. The day before her father's birthday party, she had come to print reference materials for a new design project, as her own printer had broken down, and the deadline was approaching. "Natalie, you came." Elaine opened the door and gave her a formal hug. "Perfect timing. Brooke just went out to buy decorations for the party, and I've just ordered the cake." "Thank you," Natalie responded quietly. "May I use the printer?" "Yes, of course. Use it in the study, by the way. Have you already prepared your father's present? Natalie gave a small smile. Yes. I found the vintage watch he's been wanting. Oh, that's nice, Elaine said, but her voice lacked enthusiasm. Brooke bought a golf set. Your father will be thrilled. Natalie nodded silently and headed upstairs to the study, feeling her mother's words pierce her heart even as she tried not to show any emotion entering the study. When turning on the computer, a password screen appeared. Natalie sighed. Mom, can you tell me the password? She called downstairs. Oh, I forgot I changed it last week. Elaine came upstairs. My smartphone will be quicker. Your materials came by email, right? Elaine unlocked her iPhone and handed it to Natalie. Here. Use this. I need to make a final confirmation call about the cake. I'll be back in about 30 minutes, okay? Thanks. When Elaine left the room, Natalie let out a relieved sigh. She opened the email app on her mother's smartphone and began searching for the materials she had sent herself. She downloaded the attachment and sent it to the printer. As the printer started working, Natalie found herself at loose ends unconsciously. She returned to the home screen of her mother's phone and began scrolling through the apps. Her attention was caught by a folder labeled Private Albums. Private Albums. Natalie whispered, driven by curiosity. She tapped on the folder. The screen displayed dozens of photo albums with titles like Brooke's Birthday, Florida, Trip 2023, Christmas Dinner, Family Weekend. Natalie frowned. She had never heard about these events. Strange. She tapped on the album titled Brooke's Birthday. Photos appeared one after another. Her sister Brooke sitting smiling in front of a birthday cake. Surrounding her were their parents, friends, and relatives. Natalie gasped. This was from 3 months ago. She hadn't been invited. What is this? Her hands began to shake. Next, she opened Florida Trip 2023. There were photos of her parents and Brooke enjoying themselves on a beach in Miami. Checking the date, it was the same week Natalie had been told, can't go on a family trip because of an important presentation. They lied to me. Natalie's voice trembled. Then Christmas dinner. This was last Christmas, when Natalie had been told there are no special family plans and spent the day alone in her apartment. The photos showed the family around a lavish dinner table, even grandfather Howard was there. Natalie's heart began to rap. She opened Family Weekend and saw more family photos without her in them. She went through all the albums in the folder one by one. In none of the photos was she present. Why, tears fell from her eyes. She didn't even notice that the printer had stopped at that moment. She heard the door opening downstairs. Natalie, did you finish printing the materials? Elaine's voice called out. Natalie quickly restored the phone to its original state and wiped her tears. However, she couldn't wipe away the emptiness and pain spreading inside her chest. Yes, I did, she answered with a trembling voice. When Elaine returned to the study, Natalie had already packed her materials into her bag and was standing. You're leaving already? Elaine asked, somewhat surprised. Yes, I still have things to do. Natalie couldn't meet her mother's eyes. I see you're coming to the party tomorrow, right? Natalie nodded without saying anything. She hurried down the stairs and toward the front door. Natalie, are you okay? Did something happen? Elaine followed after her. Nothing. See you tomorrow. Natalie answered briefly, opening the door and stepping outside. Once in her car, she rested her forehead against the steering wheel and cried quietly. The unease she had felt for years now stood clearly before her in a definite form. She had been excluded from her family, and deliberately so. Back at her apartment, Natalie couldn't sleep all night. She dug into past memories, recalling her family's words and actions. Natalie is busy. Natalie wouldn't be interested. Don't tell Natalie, she'll be hurt. These words now resonated with new meaning by the time the morning sun streamed through her window. Natalie had made a decision. She picked up her cell phone and sent the same message to all family members. Don't contact me anymore. Then she blocked them all. Phone, social media, all means of contact. It was a strange feeling, a mixture of liberation and sadness. San Francisco's spring was changing gradually, just like Natalie's state of mind 3 months after cutting ties with her family. She had maintained her isolation and immersed herself in work. Her reputation at Creative Impulse had risen even more than before, having won an award last month for a campaign for a major beverage company. Sipping her coffee while looking at the cityscape visible from her office window, Natalie felt the void in her heart still aching. But her daily life moved forward. "Wanna come to a new yoga class with me?" Her colleague Rachel stopped by her desk. "I heard the instructor is really good." This weekend, Natalie smiled. Rachel was a colleague she had become particularly close to since cutting ties with her family. Sounds good. I'd like to try it. Her cell phone vibrated. It was a call from an unknown number. Normally she would ignore it, but for some reason she felt compelled to answer. Hello, Natalie. It's me. Natalie's heart jumped at her grandfather Williams. Voice. Grandfather. I'm sorry. I'm calling from a new number. I heard you blocked everyone in the family. William's voice was calm, but contained a hint of sadness. Natalie stood up and headed to the conference room. I didn't mean to block you too, but no need to explain. I understand, Howard said. But there's something I need to talk to you about. Could you come to my house this evening? Natalie hesitated. What is it about? I want to talk in person. This isn't a conversation for the phone. Her grandfather's voice had an unusual urgency. All right, she finally agreed. I'll come at 6 after hanging up. Natalie stood by the window, looking down at the city of San Francisco. The prospect of reuniting with her grandfather brought both expectation and anxiety to her heart. Howard Langston's mansion was located in an upscale residential area in northern San Francisco, passing through the stone gates, a well-maintained garden spread out when Natalie rang the doorbell. The butler, Harold, greeted her. Natalie was led through the spacious hallway to her grandfather's study. Howard was sitting in a leather chair in front of the fireplace. His appearance was still dignified, but he seemed a bit thinner than before. Natalie, I'm glad you came. Howard stood up and embraced his grandfather. Natalie relaxed a little in his arms. I'm glad to see you're well. Sit down. Howard pointed to another chair in front of the fireplace. First, I want to say that I don't blame you for your decision. Natalie nodded silently. I know about the photos, Howard said quietly. Elaine told me that you found them. Tears welled up in Natalie's eyes. Why, grandfather? Why am I the only one who was excluded? Howard finished her sentence. That's what I want to talk to you about today. Grandfather stood up and took an old leather-bound album from the bookshelf. This is the family history I've recorded over the years. Olivette took the album from her grandfather and opened it. It contained family photos she had never seen before, pictures of her mother, Elaine, when she was young, Christmas scenes with her grandparents. And then this is Natalie gasped. Yes, your mother and her sister. Your Aunt Elizabeth. Natalie was confused. Aunt does mother have a sister? Had. Howard said gravely. Elizabeth died 30 years ago in a car accident. Natalie continued, turning the pages. Aunt Elizabeth looked very similar to her mother, Elaine, but her eyes seemed gentler and more open. But how does this relate to our family's problems? Howard let out a deep sigh. Elaine and Elizabeth were always competitive. Elizabeth was bright, sociable, and loved by everyone. Elaine, on the other hand, he searched for words, was more introverted and jealous. After Elizabeth's death, Elaine changed. The darker aspects of her personality became stronger. Still, why am I? You resemble Elizabeth. Natalie, Howard said quietly. Not just in appearance, but in character too. Your honesty, your kindness for your mother. Perhaps that brings back painful memories. Natalie was speechless. She stared at her aunt's photos, however. That's no excuse. William's voice suddenly grew stronger. What Elaine, Brooke, and Stephen did to you is inexcusable. They lied to me. Natalie said quietly, telling me there were no family gatherings when in fact, yes, and they lied to me too. Howard said, unable to contain his anger. Natalie is too busy to come. Natalie said she's not interested. I believed them. I was foolish. Tears fell from Natalie's eyes. You didn't know. If I had known, I would never have allowed it. Howard said resolutely. Brooke came to me last month crying and told me the truth, probably out of guilt. Natalie looked up in surprise. Brooke. Yes, your estrangement seems to have shocked her. She has always done what her mother told her. But this time her conscience must have troubled her. Howard stood up and walked to his desk. Natalie, I've made a decision. Next Saturday, I'm holding a special dinner at this house. I'm inviting the entire family. What? But I want you to come. Howard looked at Natalie with serious eyes. This is also for your vindication. And I have something to tell everyone, the whole family. Natalie looked at her grandfather with a confused expression. Grandfather, what are you planning? That's a surprise for the day. Howard smiled slightly. I'm proud of you, Natalie, of your strength and sincerity. And now, it's time to demonstrate that to the entire family. Natalie took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. She didn't feel ready to face her family again. However, seeing her grandfather's determined gaze, she nodded weakly. All right, grandfather, I'll come. Good decision, Howard said with satisfaction. I'll send formal invitations, but the dress code is formal. I want to make it an occasion worthy of celebrating the family reunion." As she was leaving, Natalie turned at the door and asked her grandfather, "Grandfather, are you sure about this? You seem to be plotting something." Howard smiled. "Don't worry. It's just that the time has come for the truth to be revealed on Saturday evening." Of guilt. Natalie Stephen approached. "It's been a while." "Yes, it has," Natalie answered briefly. An awkward silence ensued at that moment. Howard entered the room. He was wearing a black tuxedo and appeared unusually dignified. "Everyone, please be seated." Howard announced, "Tonight is a special dinner," as everyone sat around the dining table. Howard picked up his glass before making a toast. "There's something I want to tell everyone," he stood up and said in a solemn voice. "For many years, I have cherished the honor of this family. I have valued honesty and dignity." He looked at Natalie, "And tonight, I want to reaffirm those values." Howard looked around the table. "Elaine Stephen Brooke." His voice sounded cold. "I know what you have done to Natalie, excluding her from the family, lying, hurting her." Elaine's face changed color. "Dad, that's be quiet." William's voice was stern. "I don't want to hear excuses. These are not the values I taught you." He walked over to Natalie. "Natalie, Keller is the most honest, hardworking, and valuable person in this family. Her success is all the result of her own efforts." Tears welled up in Natalie's eyes. Howard placed his hand on her shoulder. "And tonight, I have made a decision," he said, facing the table. "I designate Natalie as the heir to my fortune and business." A wave of shock ran through the room. Elaine gasped. Stephen half rose from his chair. Brooke's face turned pale. "Dad, what do you mean?" Elaine asked in a trembling voice. "It's clear," Howard answered calmly. "After my death, the Langston family fortune and management rights to the real estate business will transfer to Natalie. This is my final decision, and the legal procedures are already complete." Natalie was stunned. She looked up at her grandfather, overwhelmed by his determined expression. "Grandfather, this is not a punishment," Howard said, addressing the entire family. "This is a decision to give the right responsibility to the right person." Howard raised his glass to Natalie Keller. "My granddaughter, and the future of the Langston family," with trembling hands. Natalie raised her own glass in the imposing conference room of Langston Real Estate. Natalie was reviewing newly arrived documents a week. After her grandfather's dinner, she had officially been appointed as a director of the company, holding a business card with the company logo. It still didn't feel real. The door was knocked, and her grandfather Howard entered, getting adjusted. He asked with a smile. Little by little, Natalie answered, "Honestly, I have a lot to learn about the real estate industry. I believe in your sharp insight and learning ability." Howard sat in the chair opposite her. "Besides, you already have proven management sense in the advertising industry. You'll bring a new perspective to this company." Natalie nodded and shifted her gaze to the window. The downtown skyscrapers were visible. "What about father and my sister?" William's expression clouded on the surface. "They're accepting your appointment. Stephen continues to work in the sales department, as before. And Brooke started working as a financial assistant last week. Is it really okay?" Natalie couldn't hide her concern. "They probably need time to face the truth." Grandfather said quietly, "Now, then from today I'm giving you access to all accounting records and transaction histories to understand the company's reality. It's important to know its past." From that day on, Natalie began dividing her time between her job at the advertising agency and managing Langston Company. Her attention to detail and analytical skills quickly began to show results. She scrutinized the accounting records for the past 5 years and investigated transaction patterns. 3 weeks later at night, Natalie remained at the company office, concentrating on reading materials. She frowned as she checked the same numbers, repeatedly strange. She muttered. The monitor displayed the company's accounting system. She investigated deeper, cross-referencing bank account statements, deposit and withdrawal records, and client transaction histories. Finally, she discovered a pattern of irregularities. This is Natalie took notes with trembling hands and printed out the data. Over the past 3 years, funds had been regularly withdrawn from the company and transferred to multiple accounts that were difficult to trace. Further investigation revealed that these accounts were related to personal investments by her father, Stephen, and sister Brooke. Unbelievable. Natalie gathered the materials and stuffed them into her bag. She needed to report to her grandfather immediately. The next morning in William's home study, Natalie explained her discovery. "Do you have proof?" Howard asked with a stern expression. "Yes, all the evidence is here." Natalie spread out the files. Father and my sister have diverted about $2 million from the company over the past 3 years, overcharging clients, fictitious expenses, fake transaction records. I have evidence for everything. Howard was silent for a long time. Anger and disappointment flickered in his eyes. I was blind. He finally said, my own daughter and granddaughter, such betrayal. What will you do? Natalie asked quietly. Howard stood up and walked to the window. I considered legal action, but that would expose the family's shame. He turned around instead. I'll hold another family meeting this time. I'll call all relatives. All of them. Natalie asked in surprise. Yes, all members of the Langston and Keller families, including cousins, about 30 people. William's voice was filled with determination for the honor and future of the family. All truths should be revealed a week later. William's mansion was bustling with relatives for the first time in a while. Natalie sat next to her grandfather, nervous. But with a straight back, she looked at her father and sister sitting on the opposite side of the room. They were clearly anxious after dinner. Howard stood up and clinked his glass. Dear family members, I've gathered you all today at this important crossroads for the Langston family. He said solemnly, my life is drawing to a close in the time I have left. I want to secure the future of this family. He beckoned to Natalie. She stood up and stood beside her grandfather. I formally announce Natalie Keller as the next president of Langston Real Estate. Howard declared. A murmur arose in the room. However, before that, there's something I want everyone to know. Howard slowly looked around the room. Recent investigations have revealed that company funds were misappropriated. The room suddenly fell silent. Stephen Brooks, stand up. Williams' voice was stern. Natalie's father and sister stood up trembling. You have betrayed the trust of the Langston family. Howard held up a file. Here is the evidence that you diverted company funds for private use and falsified records. Wait, that's a misunderstanding. Stephen desperately raised his voice. You'll have an opportunity to explain, Howard said calmly, but the evidence is clear. Elaine stared at her husband and daughter, her face pale. Is this true? Her voice trembled. Brooke had tears in her eyes and couldn't speak. Stephen also fell silent. This is my judgment, Howard declared. Stephen and Brooke are banished from Langston Company as of today. Natalie will take full authority over the company. The room buzzed. Relatives looked at each other with expressions of surprise and shock. Olivet stood quietly, savoring the irony of fate. The family that had excluded her would now be excluded by her. But there was no joy in her heart, only a quiet conviction that justice was being served. The summer sun in San Francisco reflected off the glass windows of Langston Real Estate new office building as preparations for the first anniversary celebration continued. Natalie stood by the window gazing at the city view. Over the past year, her life had changed in unimaginable ways. Everything is ready. President, her secretary. Jennifer smiled as she entered the room. Natalie turned around and returned a grateful smile. Thank you. Has grandfather arrived? Yes, he's waiting in the lobby. Almost everyone else has gathered too. Natalie took a deep breath and relaxed her shoulders, letting go. Then as she rode the elevator, she reflected on the past year after her father and sister's fraud was exposed. She courageously resigned from creative impulse and devoted all her energy to rebuilding Langston Company. Initially, she struggled to regain the industry's trust, but her integrity and innovative approach gradually won recognition. Currently, Langston Company had achieved 20% growth compared to the previous year and was once again a respected company in the real estate industry. Arriving at the lobby, Howard was standing straight, despite holding a cane next to him. Was Natalie's mother, Elaine. Natalie. Her mother called out, looking a bit tense. Mom, thank you for coming. Natalie responded quietly. Repairing the relationship with Elaine was slow and not easy. After deciding to separate from Stephen, Elaine had attempted to contact her daughter and apologized multiple times. Natalie had initially kept her distance, but over time began to open her heart. You've raised a wonderful company, Howard said, embracing his granddaughter's shoulders. I'm proud, it's all thanks to you, grandfather. Natalie smiled at the venue. Clients and employees had gathered to celebrate Natalie's achievements. Models and drawings of new projects were displayed on the walls, symbolizing Langston Company's bright future. When it was time for the congratulatory speech, Howard took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for gathering today. 1 year ago, I made a major decision regarding the future of this company, and now I am confident that decision was correct. He extended his hand to Natalie as she stepped onto the stage. Applause erupted later in the party. As Natalie was taking a break in a quiet corner, her mother approached. "I heard from Brooke," Elaine said quietly. "She's still unable to recover from the broken engagement." Natalie nodded silently. Her sister's fiancé's family had broken off the engagement immediately after the fraud was exposed. "What did you tell her the truth?" Elaine answered that actions have consequences. A quiet understanding flowed between them. "What about Dad?" Natalie asked. "I heard he got a job at a small real estate company in another state." Elaine shrugged. "We won't be getting back together." I think Natalie gazed out the window. The sunset was beginning to spread across the sky. The hatred and anger were fading, and instead a quiet acceptance and determination to move forward filled her heart. "A new beginning," she said quietly. "Yes." Elaine agreed, "for all of us." Natalie gave her mother a small smile. The future was still uncertain, but she was confident in the path she was walking. No hidden truth would ever shake her again.